Hey guys, I'm Dorian and welcome to Massive in Depth number 3. Today we're going to be giving an overview of Massive's oscillator section, and then we're going to go over the functionality of Massive's wavetable oscillators. Massive's oscillator section comprises the entire left column of the synth. You can see 3 wavetable oscillators stacked on top of a modulation oscillator, and at the bottom we have the noise next to the feedback knob. Our main sources of sound are the wavetable oscillators. Before we go into their functionality, let's talk about what a wavetable oscillator is. A wavetable oscillator produces a sound by repeating a very short sample of sound at audio rates between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz. The speed at which it repeats determines its pitch. For example, if a waveframe repeats at 440 Hz, it will produce a standard concert pitch A, the tuning reference point for Western music and the pitch of the common tuning fork. The length of the samples are in milliseconds, and they are combined together into a single audio file called a wavetable. This can be easily demonstrated in Serum. If we open up Serum and grab the basic shape oscillator, which is under analog, you can see all of the basic shapes, and you can morph through them. If we go ahead and export this, and open it up in Audacity, you can see that the waveframes are just tacked together. You have the sine, and then the saw, and then the triangle, and then the square. And then I think there's a pulse at the end. And the wavetable position knob basically just perfectly grabs where they split. And if we go into process or morph and we crossfade, we can get a smooth transition. This is exactly how Massive works, and I can show you by loading some of its wavetables. Modern Talking, for example. So you can see Modern Talking is only made out of 6 wavetables, but they morph together to make this sound. So if we go back to Massive, so we can start explaining Massive's wavetable position knob now. It works pretty much exactly how Serum works. It crossfades between those frames. Except for the process is hidden from us. In Serum we can see it happening. In Massive it's just behind the scenes. But even though you can't hear them, you can listen to them. And there's quite a few of them in the wavetable menu. Obviously there's some extremely iconic ones such as Modern Talking. Interesting. There you go. Probably the most famous wavetable out of Massive. So after you grab your wavetable, you can control the pitch right here. The left number is semitones and the right synths. Underneath we have modulation slots. We can grab a macro, put it on. Or an envelope. Next we have the center knob, which functions differently depending on which menu mode you have. So in spectrum mode, it acts as a sort of low-pass filter, but it has a very digital sound, so depending on what you're going for, that could be good or bad. Next you see the bin modes, and this is best shown in Serum, which has the view for it. So if we go into Serum, and we go into default, and I set the mode to bend plus. Perhaps not the best one. you can see that bin plus bends the waveform towards the center from the right and the left. And minus outwards. Bin plus minus is just unidirectional. Towards the right, it spreads out. Towards the left, it spreads in. And massives works exactly the same way. You can even see it in the manual. Right here. This image describes that. So finally, there's the format mode. It's sort of hard to explain, and it's the first thing that we've come to that Massive has that Serum doesn't. The manual describes this in terms I don't quite understand, but it basically sounds halfway in between an oscillator sink and a valve filter. Next we have the amp knob, which controls the relative volume of the oscillator. An interesting thing to point out is that Massive is partially an analog modeled synth. If you drive the amps with higher volumes, they will quote-unquote distort. This is how the manual describes it. A significant point about knobs and faders is that Massive has been made to function as much as possible like their physical counterparts in an analog hardware synthesizer. In some cases, this significantly affects the sound that is produced. For example, if you turn up the amp knob on one of the oscillators, this will increase the output level of the oscillator into the filter buses, just as you would expect. However, it may also change the quality of the sound coming out of the filter as well, as you drive the filter input hotter, just as you would with real analog circuitry. I personally can't hear this effect very much, nor have I noticed it on a spec analyzer, but I thought it was pretty interesting to read. They sort of just stuck it in, that piece of information, just like in the middle of the manual. It wasn't even in the oscillator section. Finally, to the right of the amp is the filter slider, and this changes the amount of this oscillator going to each one of the filters. At the top, it goes only to the top. At the bottom, only to the bottom. In the center, it is mixed. And finally, you can turn the oscillators on and off by clicking this little button here. Aside from being a quick way to audition differences in patches, you can also save CPU by turning them off if you need that. All right, this is going to conclude this Massive in depth. Thanks.